Hey, everybody, it is 1 o'clock and we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for our framework walkthrough and getting started with framework. It's one of the segments of Success Services that we're always super excited to present and get people involved because we are starting to pour a lot of resources and content into getting people involved and starting up into framework because we understand the value of understanding the numbers. And we think framework is the first step in knowing your numbers. Understanding the industry so that you can better understand your numbers is the steps that we're wanting to take through this. And our aim for all of this is to kind of get you familiar with the functionality of framework as well as the key features and the value that we think presents within this tool. My name is Taylor Leaphart. I am a part of the Success Services team here at Hinge, and I'm joined with Kristine Mehler, who is our Financial Coach Lead of Success Services. She handles all of our QuickBooks training and financial coaching when it comes to Success Services and client services. So we're super happy to have her on so that she can kind of drop some awesome tips and tricks and insights when it comes to the reasoning why we have different tools in place and how you can leverage those to maximize value and to really help you along your financial and success journey. Kristine,
Taylor,
anything?
I'm always excited to be a part of this. It's a really amazing process. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think now that we are doing the introductions, let's jump in. Starting with just a quick agenda. So we're going to do a quick framework walkthrough, maybe hit some best practices along the way as far as inputting your numbers, reviewing the reports and insights, and what are those what if games and functionality and excuse me, the forecast functionality tools that we've implemented within framework and how to best use those, what they tell you, and how they can help you going forward and put some really good strategic steps in place so that you can achieve value and find success in your financials. And then we'll wrap things up with some recommended best practices of now that you have your numbers inputted and in place, what are the numbers telling you? And how can we link you up with Kristine to make sure that you're taking those steps in that journey so that you're not only finding success today, but you're finding sustainable growth and success in whatever that means for you and your company. And then go further. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for Hinge? And how can we hook you up with all the resources you need to be successful and to realize that growth? So jumping down, some best practices. So after kind of walking through this tool with clients a lot, we found that starting this process as prepared as you can only helps you out in the long run. It makes this process a lot easier and a lot smoother when it comes to inputting your numbers. It can be very tricky because, again, there might be a mismatch of some of the labelings that we use versus your P&L. So we want you to be as prepared as possible with all of your numbers beforehand and to give you the resource to pick up the phone and call us, allow us to walk it through with you. But for us to able to do that successfully, we found that if you have your current tuition rate sheets, your current enrollment, and your most recent profit and loss statement for whatever the most current 12-month period you have available will work beautifully in this tool. So having those three key pieces of information will get you on your way to really getting the maximum value and information out of this tool as possible. And of course, we've broke up the tool into 5 different segments based off of the 5 pillars of financial health that we at Hinge have identified. And we found that those are natural breaking points for you to take a breath, for you to reorganize your numbers so that you can tackle the next section, or is a really good spot to do, again, like I said, just pick up the phone and call Kristine, call myself, call somebody here at Hinge, because we are all very well versed in this tool and can get you pointed in the right direction and get you back on success. So with that being said, Kristine, if you have anything else you want to add before we jump back in.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the importance of having that profit and loss updated regularly. If you don't have 12 months, look at the future. What is your tuition going to be? There are some strategies that you can implement around that. And so it doesn't have to be perfect, but we want it to be as accurate as it can be.
That's exactly right. And to your point, this brings up another functionality that we talk about a lot is forecasting and looking at if I know what my tuition is going to be in the next 6 months, how do my expenses need to adjust? And this tool can get you prepared for that perfectly. So even if you don't have the most current, if you have your tuition scheduled out year in advance, 6 months in advance, if you do a 6 month rate increase, both of those are be very important information pieces to include in this tool, and just gives you a lot of great flexible information in the long run. So let's jump into the tool and framework. Let's get us onto the web browser. Here we go. So this would be the landing page. Once you have made your account into framework and you've loaded some basic information as far as your school and your contact information is concerned, this will be the landing page where you start to fill out all the information pertaining to your school. A couple things that I like to point out here at the landing page is that we have located a lot of resources just right off of the jump for your disposal and your consumption right here at the top of this web page with our webinars and articles. The webinars brings you a direct link onto our YouTube channel where we have already populated a plethora of best pieces that gives you information from staffing to revenue management to operating expense controls, just very bite-sized pieces so that you can take those on your way and implement them directly into your operations, as well as there are full-length framework guides that we've been doing month to month over the past year. And these are just great to go back and review as we have dropped all kinds of little nuggets depending on the different topics that we wanted to tackle for that different video. And Kristine's on a lot of those too. So be sure to kind of go in there and make sure that you're getting all the information that we have available. But we've also implemented those videos into the reports and insights that we'll review in the back section after we've inputted our numbers, so that whenever the tool recognizes an area of importance or need in your financials, it'll have a direct link to some of those videos and blogs so that you can tackle that situation head on. So getting back to the landing page, this is basic information, school name, address, that gives us some market information for the tool to pull when it comes time to look at your benchmark analysis. Very easy information. Let's jump into the tuition and occupancy portion. So when it comes to tuition and occupancy, I love the way that we built this tool out. It wasn't always this way, but I feel like this allows for maximized flexibility given the different tuition periods and rates and overall classroom segmentation that each school provides. So it allows for a lot of different creative scenarios that we can walk through. But up here at the top is the annual net revenue before discounts, which is important. We have a section dedicated to discounts, and we'll identify those in the next section. But this will be for the 12-month period that is identified in your P&L. What is your tuition billing period and how many periods are within that 12 months that we've been identified here for net revenue? Also important to point out as we walk through, these little eye icons allow you to see what we're trying to capture within that input number. So you see that we're looking for total revenue before discounts. So this will be total revenue plus all tuition and other revenues. But we want to exclude any and all grant and non-reoccurring revenue in this number. We have a separate input section for that. That would be a line item that we would consider below the line, something that's non-operational, it's non-essential to the day-to-day operations of your school. However, tuition, any fees related to registration or regularly occurring fees that you would have year to year, all should be included in this number.
Yeah, Taylor, let's a little bit more in depth there. So
yeah,
the
absolutely. Love it.
reimbursement grants are a steady revenue stream.
Mhm.
Whereas the one-off grants that we've all received, they're going to fall down below in a different category or bucket. So just remember, this is your tuition, your subsidy, your reimbursement grants that are happening all year long.
Yeah,
So just to keep that clear.
that's a great thing to point out, because we get the question all the time of, how do I handle my food program, my CACFP cost? And you see some, they put it below the line, some put it above the line, depending on how they handle the expenses. But
Mhm.
traditionally, and I think as a standard, Kristine and I both agree that those should be above the line, recognized in this revenue number that we're talking about here, this annual net revenue before discounting. Um, Primarily because we also recognize the expenses as regularly occurring expenses as well. So as Kristine said, all of those one-time grants would be considered below the line, not included in this number, but like other things, reimbursement grants such as food program, for example, would be included in this number.
Mhm.
That was a great point out, Kristine. Thanks for that. And now trekking down, just some general questions about, are you keeping up with your tuition based on the competition in your area? And when was your last rate increase and what was that increase? It just gives the tool a benchmark understanding of what the operations of your company from a revenue perspective have been over the last 12 months in recent history. So we want to see us be as true to competition as possible. And it's important to identify true competition, not just the next daycare or childcare or preschool down the road, because that may not be your true competition. We want to identify what you and your school are actually competing with within your market, and then the increase in tuition that's accordingly.
And
Walking,
Taylor, I
yeah,
think
go
it's
ahead.
important to, a lot of owners and historically have updated once a year
Mhm.
tuition, increased it. And we're saying, whether you increase it once a year, look at it at least twice a year, a deep dive into where you are and where you need to be.
I completely agree, especially with as much as expenses and the cost of care have increased. We've seen a rising trend of, that tuition increase go from 3 to 5% now, and nudging into the 8+% year over year increases. But to that point, we've seen another trend emerge where it is twice a year increases to kind of mitigate that shock factor of that once 10% increase year over year. It might make it a little bit more manageable for your parents. But I think overall, we need to be taking a better look at our revenue streams at least twice a year. Kristine, great point out there. I want to mention also, as we're walking through this, if you have any questions and what Kristine and I are talking about, anything that we're walking through in the framework tool, drop those questions into the chat box here, and Kristine and I will be looking out for those questions as they come in. So feel free to just drop those as they come to you, and we'll take them in stride. But jumping back into tuition rates, the way we have this set up is so that you can identify each scheduled tuition rate that you offer per classroom, per age group. So the way this all works is you identify your age group or your classroom, input your capacity for that classroom, and then the different tuition segments that you offer for that individual classroom. So there may be a very unique situation where you only offer full-time for your toddlers and younger, only full-time applicants. But then for your preschool age and your after-school age, you have part-time. This tool allows you to do that and allows you to identify all of those revenue or tuition streams that you offer your parents. So in this example, just for demonstration's sake, if I wanted to add another after-school classroom, we could do that here. The model would load a different classroom, and I could add a different segment for my tuition. So you can see I have a full-time, and then I could have a part-time where my capacity is, let's say, 30. And I have just the same rates as my other classroom, but different enrollments. So I have 10 students, 10 after schoolers enrolled at a full-time rate of 125. And then my lower part-time rate at 110, I say I have 5 included in there. So this allows you to take into account all of your enrolled students per classroom, given the capacity of that specific classroom. And you'll see how this rolls over into our discount function as well, where we have captured all of these different classrooms and the different segments so that we can identify who's capturing what as terms of discounts.
I think, Taylor, this is an opportunity also to revisit your structure, your foundation around this.
Absolutely.
If you have a lot of part-time rates, let's consolidate that. Let's simplify it a little bit and just make life a lot easier for you as the owners. And you notice here that he's got 15 enrolled with a classroom of 30 capacity. So that's a problem right there, right? We're identifying we've got to get that enrollment up in that classroom. And the question that I'm proposing to, or discussion I should say, I'm having with business owners is they don't want necessarily 100% capacity in each classroom because they don't want to sacrifice the quality of the program, and they don't want to burn out their teachers. So there's that balance to think about in this process, which really helps to flush it out and determine the best approach.
That's exactly right. I think that's a really good point, bringing up the balance between maximizing your revenue, but also understanding the more you push those ratios, the more it's going to tax your staff. And also it might require you to have more staff. If you consolidate, you might be able to save a little bit while relieving a lot of that pressure on your staff as well. So there's a lot of compounding advantages to, sitting down and understanding what are my current offerings of tuition and how is that impacting my expenses and overall operations. Oh, great points. I don't see anything popping up as far as tuition goes. But like I said, I like the way that this functions as a tool, and we've adapted over time, given their feedback from our current framework clients. And I'm really happy with this section. I think it serves everybody very well and identifies all of those revenue streams. So without hearing any questions in the chat box, we're going to save and go next and jump into discounts. So as I was mentioning earlier, based off of the classrooms that we've inputted in our tuition and occupancy section, the discount section shows a matrix of how many students per classroom are taking advantage of what discount based on the discounts that we offer. So for this example, you can see we have a multi-child discount, and there are 2 students in the 2 students in the 3-year-old classroom and 2 students in the 4s, 5 students in the after-school program that are taking advantage of this multi-child discount. And you can see that we recently added an after-school program or after-school classroom here, and we can say, 2 are taking advantage of the multiple child discount. We have a staff half discount here, and we're going to say that I'm going to say 1 child is taking advantage of that, another child for the full discount, and say we have an industry discount here. There's a local business across the street that just moved in. We want to offer them a competitive rate or an incentive to allow us to serve their children and them as well. So we incorporated that right here. Good to jump into, if we were making this new, we have identified the amount of tuition that is discounted in each of these sections here. And so we can dive into that later, and that'll be another portion of the reports and insights that the tool provides to us at the end of our input. But just for simplicity's sake, we'll have 0 after schoolers, and we'll save that here. Again, to Kristine's point, this is another area where it's really good to have a regular time and date schedule to just look at your discounts, understand how many of your enrolled students are taking advantage of those discounts, and what the return is for that individual discount. You may find that you offer a giant discount, but nobody's taking advantage of it, or the opposite. You're offering a very large discount, but finding out that you're giving away more than you're recognizing in profit from that individual classroom. And this can be a very hidden danger, as Kathy Ligon likes to say, of your profitability and your revenue generation. I know Kristine spends a lot of time identifying the tuition and discounts here, so I know she's going to jump on the soapbox here, but she's got some awesome insight and tips and tricks on.
I am Kathy Ligon's biggest fan in this area for sure. I'm going to just stand on that soapbox with her. So look, the reality is that you can't just remove discounts. So you're going to grandfather, your current families and the new families coming in. But the trend is to remove multiple child, to remove all other discounts other than staff related, and just pay attention to all of that and what you're offering. Because let's say you have young families that are coming in as your teachers, and they're having 4 and 5 children, and so now these discounts get away from you and you don't even realize the impact. This right here gives me heart palpitations, what I'm seeing on the screen, because you're going to see in a little bit what that equates to in dollars.
Right. That's exactly. And honestly, I mean, since a lot of the industry I mean, we all serve and love the children and our families so well. So we want to provide every opportunity and accessibility for those families to be a part of your organization and your care. That discounts are they come so naturally, and you want to make them accessible for your families. But we also, that can snowball very quickly. And if we don't take the time to understand what we're giving away and what the impact is to your staff in terms of enrollment, staff in terms of your bottom, like what you're able to pay them because of the discount that you're providing on the top line. If you're not able to take the time and dig into these numbers, you're doing a disservice to your overall operation and really cutting out your knees from underneath you in terms of profitability. So to Kristine's point, this is very important to keep your thumb on and make sure that you're understanding how many students that's enrolled are taking advantage of your discounts and what that equates to in dollars. So we're going to save and go next as we kind of jump away from the revenue portion and top line and go into the expense portion and go into staff costs. I don't see any questions in the chat just yet, so we're going to keep rolling here. As we go into the expense section, you'll see out of these 3 portions or pillars of expenses that we've identified: staff costs, facility, and operational expenses. The format is very similar. We'll have the main cost driver of each section at the top to identify, of course, staff costs, that will be your salaries and wages, and then facilities, that will be your rents. But as we walk through, we'll point out some key differentiators and some things to keep in mind as you're loading in these numbers. For staff costs, we want to look at what you have in your P&L for those most current 12 months that you've brought into framework will be identified here. The one thing I always like to point out here is if you are an owner operator and you're paying yourself a wage or a salary, whatever that may be, it would need to be adjusted to the fair market salary of someone who is not the owner, but working your position would be paid in your facility. So that may be adjusting up. So you're paying yourself as the owner a little bit less to free up your operational expenses and some cash flow, but you're taking a little bit off of the profit line, understanding that that's an owner draw. Or you could be maxing out your W-2 for whatever personal reason, from tax to insurance. There's a lot of different reasons for you to do that. If you're maxing that out, you may be overpaying based on the market, so you may need to adjust down to what a non-owner director would be paid in this position. So a lot of nuance there. And of course, this would be a natural break for you to pause, call Kristine, call myself, get in touch with a Hinge team member and be like, hey, I remember Taylor saying something really strange about the salaries thing. Can you walk me back through it? We'd be happy to do that with you and for you. So please feel free to do that. But let's make sure we give some attention and make sure this is an accurate number as possible, because this is such a large driver of our profitability and in framework from a results standpoint. Before we
Taylor,
walk
we also,
yeah,
I'm sorry, we also look at if you're an S corporation, you're required to have a reasonable salary, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
determining what that reasonable salary is and then including that in that category is important. And to your point of maxing out, we still have to find a way to have the profit to be able to do that. So we do go back and forth on that number that should go in that field.
Yeah, that's great points. As we're walking through away from the salaries line item, we've identified some very common and pretty standard line items associated with staffing costs. And again, we want to make sure that we're utilizing the icon button here just to make sure that we're lining up each line item as consistently and as accurately as possible. So we also understand there are a lot of other line items that come into staff costs, and that we've identified this miscellaneous staff cost right here, just to pick up the bucket of any meetings expense, gifts, uniforms, etc. All of those expenses can just be consolidated into this bucket right here. I know Kristine doesn't like miscellaneous staff or miscellaneous cost line items, but for framework's sake, as an initial analysis, I think this does a really good job. And then we could take the next step forward into Kristine's financial journey to get those QuickBooks really cleaned up so that we're being accurate and identifying all those expenses. But for this analysis, if you have anything that doesn't match what we've identified, the taxes, benefits, training, or recruitment, feel free to utilize this bucket down here. One other thing I like to point out as we go through our expenses sections is that if you truly have zero costs associated with any line item for an expense, you would need to input a zero. The model is set up such that if you leave it blank, it will automatically pull the benchmark expense into your P&L. So maybe recruitment's not a good example. So if we had zero training costs and we left it blank, when it came to our reports and insights, this $4,181 would appear in our P&L, even though we do not recognize that on our P&L. So let's make sure that if it's truly zero, we input zero and everything will work out perfectly. So I think we had 5,000 in staff training here. So we're going to save that back. Kristine, anything to note before we jump into facilities, walking through expenses?
Just that, I think we'll focus on that when you get to the reports because it's really important to understand what's happening with staff costs.
Yep, exactly. So we'll save and go next and jump right into our facilities cost. Again, here, the main driver is obviously your rent. And based on your lease, if you own the property or if you lease the property, speaking directly to the lease portion, we want to exclude any and all CAM charges and include them here. So this will be your base rent, excluding all snow removal, any CAM charges, or any ancillary fees on top of rent. We want to exclude all of that and put your base rent here, annual CAM charges here, any other fees associated with maintenance or care, lawn care, snow removal, things of that nature. And then also your facility square foot. This just allows the model to calculate your monthly rent on a square footage basis. And that's just a really good benchmark overall when it comes to commercial real estate. And we can identify that with this model based off your monthly rent for the childcare sector in particular when it comes to real estate. Now, if you own your building, this is also kind of brings up a little bit of a curveball. You may just be paying the mortgage, or you may own the building outright and not be paying yourself a rent at all. That's very common. There's also the case where you own the building, but it is owned in a third-party property LLC that owns the company, and your operations pays it rent. That would be the case where you just input the base rent based off of the lease and you're good. But if you're paying yourself or you're just paying the mortgage from the operations, I would go ahead and just input the mortgage that you're paying in here and understand that when we get to the benchmark analysis, that there's going to be some nuance in that number. We typically like to see somewhere in the 12 at the top end, the 15% range of total revenue being attributed to rent. But in your case, it may be significantly lower. So that just may be some things that we need to take into consideration in the review process once we get to the back end of all this. But go ahead, if you are paying your mortgage out of your operations, go ahead and input that number here. Anything to add, Kristine, before we jump into the line items?
Yeah, this is the opportunity to juggle the percentages in your facility costs, because if you have that separate LLC and you have a lease agreement, the center pays the LLC the rent, you control that rent. So therefore you control your cost center percentages that way. So you guys will see that in just a minute in the reports.
That's exactly right. But exact same as staff costs, with the most common line items that we see within the industry, we have identified here, and you can input all of your numbers as you see fit based off of the little information icons that we have here, as well as the miscellaneous bucket. So if you have just a random facilities charge, something that you have incorporated in there, I'm trying to think one off the top of my head that we don't have here. Man, I think we did a really good job covering our bases on this one. Maybe a larger vehicle expense might be attributed in here if you have something that is pertaining to your repairs and maintenance facilities team, that might go into this bucket. But anything ancillary, feel free to use this as well. We're going to add a 0 into that just to make sure that we're identifying that number correctly. But again, if you have any trouble identifying what your P&L says and compared to what framework is asking you to input, drop us a line. Feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. We'll get you back on track and on your way to the next section. Looking at the chat box, I don't see any questions popping up. So we're going to roll into operational expenses. And this will be the bulk, I think, for most people when it comes to their P&L, identifying the program costs, admin costs, operational expenses from a day-to-day perspective. So this will be the longest list, but it's also probably going to be the bulk of your P&L. So let's take our time walking through this, understanding what line items go with what expense, and making sure that we're identifying everything accurately and consistently across the board. Same layout as last time. Let's make sure that we're also, if there's 0 benchmark here, we have 0 attributed cost. Let's fill in these blanks. Kristine, anything overarching that you would like to add here before we move on to reports and insights?
Yeah, just same with staff costs. The program costs are just as important. There are variables that go up and down with your tuition, and I think it's important to really spend some time on your profit and loss in this area, because there's so much hidden profit, specifically in program costs. You know, I joke about the Amazon button all the time. We always love to push the Amazon button, and there's so much hidden profit in that process. So take your time and really identify your spending habits in these areas, and you will free up. Which, like I said, the program costs are going to fluctuate. They're going to be like variable, but your admin costs, your facility costs are going to be more stable, you know, more set. And so then those are your opportunities to find and free up profit that would either offset the staff costs that are too high in some cases, would offset the need to raise tuition, you know, 12 versus 10%. So you have to look at all sides of it, not just one area.
That's exactly right. Completely agree. And to walk down a little bit to what we were referencing in the beginning of our segment, those below the line costs we've identified in the other expenses and other revenues. So hitting the highlight first, of course, you're going to have grant monies, those non-reoccurring grants, unlike food program, for example. This would be your ERC grants or any local, county, state level grants that were put out and you were able to take advantage of that will not be renewing. Those will be associated here and can be identified in this box. From the expense side, we have also identified these P&L line items that are very common in a lot of P&Ls, but aren't necessarily attributed to the overall operations of your company. These are all non-cash, very accounting-based line items, as far as interest expense, depreciation, amortization. And when it comes to franchise fees, we like to see that number taking out because that will be a set number. That's something that you, as a operator, don't necessarily have control over, but we want to highlight the things that you do have control over, being the facilities cost, the program admin, staff cost. Those are things that we want to highlight. So we strip out franchise fees for that reason and include it below the line in this scenario. Anything to add to the other expenses and income, Kristine?
No, it's spot on.
Perfect. So now that we have everything set, let's save and view our reports. This is where the fun starts.
Mm-hmm.
Looking into all of the beautiful numbers that this thing provides. I like to collapse everything down because it does show you line item by line item what your benchmark is compared to the industry, or what you're realizing versus the industry. So looking at it from a top-down approach, we want to look and say, okay, on the far left is our benchmark based on our occupancy, and then our actual data is in the middle in this nice, pretty gold box. And then we can see the variance versus the benchmark industry and how we're performing. So right off of the bat, you can see that we're generating a really good number as far as revenue goes, but man, are we giving it back in terms of discounts. Industry standard is right around 5% of total revenue is being attributed to your or being given back in terms of discounts, and we're doing over double that. So this is definitely an area that framework is going to say needs some attention, needs some work, and we can go through some what if analysis in the back as we dive into that. Jumping into our expenses, you can see that we're doing a pretty good job on expenses. I mean, our staff cost here, we're doing about 20% less, $90,000 on average, better than the industry. So go us in that regard. And overall, it looks like our expense management looks really, really well. Not to say that there aren't some areas that may need some attention still, but overall, we're doing a really good job controlling those expenses. And I think it's mainly because of this number here. This would be an anomaly, I would say, at this time in the industry to see a staff cost number this low. But as reflected in the benchmark, this 50 to 60 all-in staff cost number is probably more realistic to what you're going to find after you input your numbers. Kristine, would you agree?
Yeah, we focus on 55 for total staff cost center.
Yeah.
You know what this tells me here? That the reduction in the staff costs, either there's something wrong with the accounting or the owner's working in the classroom. And
Yeah,
so
right.
that would be a conversation I'd want to have, right? We don't want owners working in classrooms. We don't want them being directors. We want them being owners. So
Right.
I would want to dig into that area a little deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And same for the facility costs. I think you can kind of derive the same assumption there that maybe we own the building and we're paying a low mortgage here, being
Yeah.
15% total cost. That normally 15% is attributed to only the rent in a lot of cases. So this may be a little bit lower than what you'll see. Again, we have identified about 23% of total revenue goes into your facilities, being rents and repairs and maintenance and other costs like that. Which is about what we're seeing right now, I would say, as well.
Yeah, and we're looking at a 31% net income. And remember, you're looking a little bit higher on that P&L because you're not including the depreciation and all the things that Taylor's pointed out, the categories. But we're after 15% or more.
Yeah.
So if that staff cost is accurate, then this is phenomenal.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But it's very important to view the P&L in this light because it does allow us to raise those questions, to dig a little bit deeper. Okay, the numbers are telling us one thing. Is that accurately reflected in the operations, or is there something else going on? So it allows us to really ask intelligent and pointed questions on how we can overall better our operations and financial health. So I'm gonna quit yapping so we can look at some awesome reports that this thing shows, because I love the way this tool is built out, and I think it gives you awesome content and understanding around each one of these sections. just focusing in on tuitions for a second. Each one of the pillars or the sections that we've identified gives you a landing page like this, a summary page that's laid out in a very similar fashion. Gives you great content, some awesome insights. Green means you're doing a great job. We kind of mentioned that earlier, that we're doing a great job as far as revenue production on an overall basis for tuition standpoint. We're showing that, hey, we're having some great increases. We're set true to competition. And we're kind of showing, and we want to show that increase be up there in that 8%, 8 to 10%, which is standard now within the industry, as well as some great resources here from articles and videos at your disposal, direct links to little tips and tricks that might help you get back on track if you weren't in the optimal range from a tuition standpoint. And great visuals, of course, on the right-hand side. One of my favorite functionalities is this what if forecasting, which is implemented in each one of these sections and allows you to see, okay, if I did increase my tuition by 10%, how does that look on a per classroom basis? And what is the overall net result of that increase? And what does the distribution look like across my classrooms? So the potential means your full capacity. So the dark blue shows your full capacity. If I was maxed out in every classroom, what could I hit? I would be looking at closer to this $1.6 million revenue generation rather than the 1.2, little under 1.2. So it just gives you great instant feedback based on the percentage of adjusted tuition that you can see here. Where this compounds is in the discounting section. And I love pointing this out here too, because again, standard format whenever you do on the landing page, but in particular, the what if forecasting can be very powerful in this segment in particular, because it does show you your potential revenue overall. If every classroom was at 100%, but then it also shows you the cost of what you're giving away, the cost of your discounts that are over $100,000, and we're giving away, well over 10% of that revenue. So with this what if forecasting, we can show, okay, what if we increased tuition by 10%? Does that help me in any way? Or what if I lessened that impact, increased by 5%, but I took away my discounts by 10%? What does that look like? How does that distribution help me? You can see we're chipping away a little bit at that number, but the what if analysis goes even further by allowing you to remove whole discounts away from your offering so that you can see the tangible impact. So what Kristine was alluding to as we were walking through the discounts, what if we did take away our multiple child and our industry discount and just left our staff discount? You can quickly see we eliminated over half of our discounts and got back to that industry average, that healthy range that we like to see by just taking advantage of some small adjustments, but they have a large impact on our revenue. So we go from what we were at was like our just over $1 million generating, and we recognize another $100,000 into that number. So you can see some really tangible results here. And this is one of the things that I know Kristine goes through with all of her clients, almost day one, trying to get to like, what does this look like? Do you understand this? And to see the tangible impact that these numbers have.
Yeah, Taylor, if you're an LLC and you haven't, you can't be on payroll as an LLC, you're taking draws. This is an opportunity to reduce those discounts, change your entity structure, and get yourself on payroll. So if you're a younger owner, you may not want to pay into Social Security, so you'd have a different strategy. If you're a little older, you'd want to pay into Social Security, right? And max it out as much as possible. So it just depends on your strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of great insights here, but that's just a small part of all the different things this what if forecasting can allow you to do, not only from tuition discounts, but we include the same thing in staffing, understanding what needs to happen if you a lot of times when it comes to staffing in particular, I think we could just sit here for a second because this is also a very important piece. When we see on a percentage basis, a center is hurting when it comes to staffing, meaning that their staff percentage is very high, it may not always be your staffing is out of whack, but it may be that your revenue is significantly lower than it needs to be. So the what if analysis here allows you to toggle between revenue, between your tuition increase and your overall control on staffing costs. Kristine, what are you kind of seeing here in terms of your clients and what you're seeing in the industry?
I'm still seeing that salary's low. It should
Yeah,
be closer to the 50s.
yeah.
And so if we raise that up, staff cost by 10% there, get it more in line,
Mhm.
what do we need to do with our tuition? And again, it's staff costs are set, right? Unless people are leaving and people are coming in with the state and the feds and all the minimum wages and all that and benefits and so forth, we have to be really mindful of what that tuition needs to be. So if you're doing a 3% cost of living increase, you're going to need to do a 3% tuition increase, you know, to stay steady where you're at. Higher if you want to improve, but again, you can lower those discounts and make up for it a little bit there. So a lot of opportunity.
That's exactly right. And I think the tools implemented within Framework allow you to get a very clear picture of where those opportunities are and how you can play with one area of your P&L and how it affects the others so that you can get a very dynamic approach and strategy on capitalizing and making sure that you're seeing a healthy profit to your bottom line. So now that we've done a kind of overall overarching walkthrough of Framework, let's jump back in and wrap up as we can kind of highlight some of the best practices that we see and that we would highly encourage everybody to take advantage of. So one of the things is you saw on the landing page for all of those insights was green indicator or a red indicator, meaning of opportunity, of success. Make sure that you're trying and striving to get everything in the green back up to those benchmarks or exceeding those benchmarks to make sure that you're realizing that 15% or more profitability margin that Kristine was alluding to earlier. Also, one of the best things that you can do so that you can have accurate and timely information is to keep this model updated so that you can see, okay, I know I have this expense on the horizon based on my last month's P&L. Looking at Framework, am I able to absorb that? Am I able to profit off of that? In the next 6 months, I know that tuition needs to increase here, or I know that my salary costs are going to have to increase here. Operational expenses are going to increase here. How does that look overall, and how does that affect my profitability? And you won't know that unless you have a consistent and accurate framework structure to work off of. The last thing we always encourage our owners and operators to do is to get your teams involved. To look at this quarterly, to look at this monthly even, make this a part of your annual or quarterly review with your staff or your high-level staff, your directors, to get some buy-in, to say like, hey, look, you're doing a rock star job of generating tuition and generating those enrollments. Let's make sure that we're capitalizing on these these operational expenses, whether it be programming or scheduling your staff, so that we can maximize our profitability. And narrating that what that profitability is doing, if you're able to get into that sweet spot, that 15% profitability or more, you're able to do a lot of stuff, a lot more opportunity to invest back into your teams, back into your schools from a facility standpoint, from an operational and curriculum standpoint. It gives you cash flow to make a bigger, brighter, more enjoyable experience for your parents, your students, and your staff. So I think narrating what this profit is going to do with your team and getting the buy-in of, yeah, let's go do that. Framework can be a great tool in that reviewing process. And the only way to really do that is to get into the reports, make sure that all these things are updated, and to contact Kristine, contact myself, get in touch with the Hinge team to make sure that your framework looks as up to date and as accurate as possible. I know Kristine uses this tool a lot with her clients. What are some of the tips and tricks that you have found super helpful with your clients?
Just aligning their financials, so it's really easy to populate the information in here.
Yeah.
We're highly recommending that they look at especially the tuition and the area on a more regular basis,
Mhm.
and at least looking at the whole picture, monthly, if not more. And they can do that on their own at any time. And then we go deeper, in our processes and coaching and deep dives. So I highly recommend that you really understand what's happening with your financial application and understanding how to really utilize the financials in your business. And I think this is a nice segue into really helping to understand what that's all about, what needs to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking of segues, one of the best ways that Kristine just gave a shout out was the QuickBooks training and cleanup and aligning your chart of accounts to Framework's chart of accounts for easy input and really applicable analysis from those what if reports that are generated out of Framework. You can directly tie those into your P&L through your QuickBooks or your management software so that you can see a one-to-one and direct impact as you update these financials. So these are all regular offerings that we provide to all of our clients, as well through Success Services. Going into the next year, these schedules are going to be set, and we're going to continue to offer these on a regular basis. And Kristine's going to play a major role in that. So you'll probably see a lot more of her when it comes to QuickBooks training, the cleanup and cash flow management, overall financial journey, and financial coaching services. Kristine heads up all of those segments when it comes to Success Services. So be on the lookout for those emails. We'll be shooting out all of our schedules as it pertains to 2024 to all of our framework users, as well as everybody that is on the Hinge newsletter. But if you have any questions or you want to have a direct link to Kristine and get in touch with her, feel free to use the link down here at the bottom is hingeadvisors.com /financial-coaching. That'll get you straight into all of our offerings for Success Services, as well as our contacts, so that you can get involved and get in the loop. Kristine, is that what else you got?
We're excited to help as many business owners that want and need it. The QuickBooks training that we're offering is custom for the childcare industry, and you guys would learn a lot more than just aligning your chart of accounts. You'll learn how to manage multiple locations and grant tracking and all kinds of great stuff that you can learn. Mostly we're really wanting everybody to understand the financials, what it means, and how to use it as a cash management tool and to create profit.
Awesome stuff. So before we wrap up, I haven't seen anything in the chat. Kristine, that means we did an awesome job explaining. Everybody understands how to walk through Framework. But if you did miss a section or you want a refresher, these videos are available on YouTube and that direct link on the Framework site. And of course, feel free to contact us directly. We're more than happy to walk through Framework or your challenges in Framework right now, inputting numbers, understanding the reports and insights. But overall, Kristine, I really enjoyed having you on here. It's always awesome to have your input in the Framework realm and understanding the financials. But also want to thank everybody that's hopped on with us for walking through Framework with us. We really enjoyed it. But like I said, if you have any questions at all, feel free to contact us directly. All of our email and contact information is on hingeadvisors.com. We'll be more than happy to serve and to help you out through there. If there's nothing else, Kristine?
No, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I enjoyed it. Thanks everybody for hopping on with us, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.